This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. You know those Pavlovian moments? You hear a piece of music and you know where you were at that point in your life. If I hear CCR, I hear that song, I hear Down in the Corner, another one of their songs. I'm 6 years old in my father's Jeep going to school, first grade. Completely tattooed on my mind. But I love that line. A calm before the storm. You absolutely have no ability to know when the hell that storm is coming. But you have to be prepared. I want to take a few minutes from a great presentation that I found from Cliff Asness, AQR. He is easily found with a quick Google search, tons of white papers, very large fund. I'm not here to promote him, but I am here to promote his style of thinking, his clarity of thinking. Now, Cliff is not just a trend-following trader. That's one thing his firm does do. They definitely have a trend-following component. But what his firm really does, what they're really known for, quantitative strategies. The way they apply trend following, they apply it in a quantitative manner. Not unlike a lot of different managers out there, they do the same thing. Cliff's firm also uses quantitative strategies across many different styles of trading, not just trend following. That's the kicker here. You know, in my world, I'm dead on. I'm in that niche. It's trend following or bust. Cliff broadens it out, but he stays rigidly focused on the systematic part of the equation, which, as you're about to see in a few minutes, is smart. It's just smart to be quantitative. Because at the end of the day, what is quantitative? Whatever you can make. And I just watched this great movie with Alan Turing. What is it, The Imitation Game? Where he's standing there in the, mid-1940s, building his computer. And he has the quote, and I'm paraphrasing. If you take a human being, a pencil, an eraser, some paper, you have a quantitative machine. Don't let the systematic make you go, oh, wow, I can't understand that. All that is doing is executing rules developed by human beings. And that great big computer in that film that Alan Turing built, all we've done in the last 50, 60, 75 years is take that baby and reduce it to the size of an iPhone. But it still operates the same damn way. It operates based on instructions of human beings. In the case of trading, in the case of Cliff Asness, he has models, systems that he mechanizes, he systematizes, he automates, buy, sell, portfolio decisions. Sometimes it gets a little sexy sounding out there across Wall Street. People want to talk about algo this and algo that. But listen to the wisdom in Cliff Asness as he speaks to the quantitative mindset.
Some common misconceptions I like to fight is the idea that quantitative investing is a black box. You have a model and it just spits out an answer. I actually argue that it's quite the opposite. I am always at a loss for what to call non-quantitative investors. These are investors who do what you always hear about investors doing: visit companies, pick specific companies, meet with management. I have no good label for them. Some people call them judgmental managers. That makes them sound like quite harsh people. It also makes it sound like we exercise absolutely no judgment. Some people call them active managers. We run portfolios. Active usually refers to not owning the benchmark, trying to beat a benchmark. We run very active portfolios. On the other hand, calling them qualitative managers seems kind of mean. I don't think they don't use numbers. They just use them differently. But I will say that I think it's often misguided to call a quantitative manager a black box. A black box is something that you have no idea why it spits out its answer. To me, a good quantitative model might be complex, but if a client, an investor, or anyone else wants to know why you own this stock and why you're short this stock, there is a precise answer. They can be a black box if you refuse to tell your clients the answer. But if you're willing to share, and I find most quants are, shockingly, we all think we've discovered the greatest thing since sliced bread, but we all enjoy bragging about it. I have a partner who does marketing for us, and he is far less willing to share the details of the models than I am, which seems completely backwards. But he's been teasing me for 15 years now that the way to get the details out of me, if you want, many people, believe it or not, do not want to know the details of our quantitative models. But if you want to know, just tell me you don't think they're very good. And I'll go, oh yeah? And I'll get a blackboard or a whiteboard out and be half an hour. Another one is that quants are trading weird patterns and they disregard fundamentals. There are quants who do that, but the bulk of quants are looking at a lot of the same things that those other kind of investors. I'll just call them non-quantitative investors, even though they might be very quantitative people. We're looking at how cheap a company is, what the growth has been, what the momentum in their both price, earnings, and anything else might be, how much risk the company has demonstrated historically. There are differences, and I'll get to that, between quantitative managers and this more typical, more well-known group. But it's not about not using fundamentals. Model-driven trading is driving with only the rear-view mirror. I hate that one. That refers to the fact that a lot of quants run backtests. And backtest is, let me come up with a rule and let's see if I had followed this rule for the last 100 years, how it would have done. This can actually be a fair criticism in some cases. If all you've done is search for what has worked well in the past and don't have a story and don't have evidence from other places and don't have any reason why you believed in it to begin with, I think this would be a very fair critique. Just because something has worked well in the past is not a reason it will work going forward. I think most quants, and I'll say this, I think there are good quantitative investors and good, I'm going to actually say normal investors, making us the abnormal investors, are really, most of them have an investment thesis. They have things they believe lead to good returns. And if anything, the rearview mirror is simply to examine how it's done and in what periods it's done particularly well or poorly. So I think almost any kind of investor can look in the rearview mirror too much. It's a danger, but it's not a fair generalization. Another misconception, quants are highly levered blow-up candidates. This one's finally fading. This kind of goes together. The book at the bottom right, I'm kind of hoping the answer is no, but has anyone read this book? Damn. I still have not. I've read excerpts. I'm one of the protagonists. There are a whole bunch of people. There are kind of four of us who he follows the most. I'm going to tell you the whole story about this book. That's what I'm going to do for the rest of this whole talk, because this book pissed me off. In August of 2007, something I'm going to discuss was a wild ride to be a quantitative investor. There was about a 2-week period where anyone doing anything vaguely similar suffered very greatly, and then it all went away and fixed itself. And this guy set out to write a book on this. And then 2008 happened, which was not very particular to quantitative investors. That was about the world crisis. And he ended up writing a book with the subtitle, Men Who Almost Brought Down the Financial Market. Some of the chapters were on people like me. Some of the chapters were on like the guys at S&P who gave AAAs to subprime mortgages. There's an argument, and I'm sure some of those guys would be upset about this characterization, but there's an argument that those guys were related to the financial crisis. The subtitle, and then the opening chapter is about me. Don't like that. The other thing I don't like is he told a little biography of everyone, and he said I was a fat kid in high school. I am a fat guy now. I was not a fat kid in high school. How does one combat that? Do you take out an ad to combat that? I've probably ruined this entire presentation with that level of shallowness. How many of you would enjoy that? One thing, getting more serious, and it's related to both of those two. A central thesis of this book was even that during this rough quantitative period in August, that we were threatening world financial market stability. And I kind of begged and pleaded with the guy for a while. This period I will discuss because it was harrowing, but it was wildly interesting. Financial markets were up over the period. They ignored us. Quants are not important in the world. We're important to us and to our investors, but I think we got exaggerated in importance in order to. I've probably sold more of this damn book by doing this whole conversation. Many of you have probably heard about high-frequency trading. That is not, I'm going to give you kind of two-edged comments on that. I'm actually a defender of it. I think it's net made the world a cheaper place to trade for anyone who wants to trade. It is not something we do. It's become almost synonymous in the financial press with quantitative trading. And let me get the logic right. All high-frequency traders are quantitative traders. They trade like every nanosecond. You really have to be a quantitative trader, or else you are the fastest talker and the most annoying person on earth. You're calling up every nanosecond is difficult. All quants are not high-frequency traders. A lot of what we trade, for instance, probably the bulk of what we trade are based on two simple concepts. And I'm going to refer back to these as I go. And they're two of the things that come out of academic finance. Value-based trading, trying to buy cheap things and sell expensive things, and momentum. The fact that even though value tends to win over the long term, what happened last Thursday tends to keep happening for a little while longer. Except the momentum we look at is even about 6 to 12 months. So we are nowhere near high frequency. When we own a stock, all else equal, we probably own it a year from now. Now, God, I sound very defensive here. You know what's funny? I haven't done this presentation in a while. People are starting to like quants again. I got to ease off the defensiveness and alter this presentation to tell you how wonderful we are. Not all the terrible things people have said. But post-2007 and 2008, which again I think was a mislabeling, people, of course, focus on the negative. Here's something I believed for a long time. Oddly, whenever a quantitative investor loses a significant amount of money or there's a bad period, somehow there's a general indictment, and even in papers like the Wall Street Journal or whatnot, it's quantitative investing has failed. Whenever someone blows themselves up the old-fashioned way without a model, you do not see articles, well, human judgment has failed again. So I do think somehow the world is biased. There have been net good returns to quantitative investing. I told a group at lunch today something I only recently realized, that when I wrote my dissertation, I used data from from 1926 through 1990. Our presentation books at AQR, almost invariably, our academic papers still use longer data, but our presentation books use data from 1990 to the present. So what I wrote my entire dissertation on, which is still a big part of what we do, is not considered relevant data by the young people who run our models today. It's entirely new. So I've lived through 23 years of this stuff working on net. But there have been epically wild times in financial markets. You don't need me to tell you that. But I think they've been rather evenly distributed, and I won't waste your time reading all of them. But there have been, and yeah, I did sneak in qualitative. I don't even know what a qualitative manager means. We like their logo. We met with them. They were funny. But there have been disasters. Investing is about surviving disasters and having a good process. Both of these have been still good since 1990. But there have been disasters, but they've been nice and evenly distributed. But I do have a little bit of a obvious sore spot for the fact that whenever someone quantitative does something bad, I think it kind of sticks to all of us. It doesn't happen the other way. So what is quant? I keep using this. These are the three things I think make up being a quantitative manager. And I have chosen to phrase each of the three shockingly as a positive. I am hopeful in the Q&A. I don't mind being challenged at all. And I'll give you a little bit of the opposite arguments as we go, but you can push me on them. Objective and discipline. I mentioned one of the classic quantitative strategies. We've been working on trying to make ours better for 20 some odd years, but it's still about trying to buy cheap things and sell expensive things on some things you'd recognize. All else equal, if a company has a low price to earnings ratio, we like it a little better. It's about that complicated. It's just a whole bunch of stuff like that. If you find yourself trying to buy, actually looking at a value portfolio, put together a portfolio that's long the 200 cheapest stocks in the market and short the 200 most expensive on simple measures. Long the stocks with the lowest average of the price to earnings, price to book, price to sales, and short the most expensive ones. When you look at the portfolio you own, you're going to throw up a little bit. You're going to go, I own this stuff? I can't believe it. These are the worst stocks. Because markets might not be perfect. And I went to the University of Chicago to get my degree, so that's a hard admission from me. They might not be perfect, but they're not complete idiots either. Markets work long term. Value investing has worked not because cheap companies are generally much better companies than expensive. It has worked because they get a little too cheap. Buying a bad company can be a good idea if the price is too low. Selling or shorting a great company can be a wonderful idea if the price is too high. So objective and discipline, we do find great non-quantitative managers can hold themselves to this. I don't think this is only quants. They can hold this discipline in their head and not get caught up. A lot of investors get caught up in the hype, and we think this is part of why things like value investing work. They end up paying too much for things that have had good times over the last 4 or 5 years, and the opposite. Another thing that's very difficult is, if you remember, I mentioned 2 styles, and there are many different things. I'm going to try to keep it simple and pretend quantitative investing really comes down to mostly value and momentum trading. That means trying to find cheap things that have actually started to get better. We find that works decently better than just buying cheap things. But they often want you to do the opposite. Something that's been doing well, has good momentum for the last 6 to 12 months, is often on the expensive side. We find, as have a host of other people, unfortunately it's not just us who know about this, that doing both, which means you end up looking for a combination of the two. And it often means compromise. It means you can't buy the cheapest stock in the universe because it's also in the process of still cratering. You can buy the 14th cheapest stock in the universe because it used to be the cheapest, but it's actually been recovering. Maybe it has both value and momentum. One additional part of being a quant and being objective and disciplined is it's very, very hard for an individual to keep both those concepts in their heads. I find I've had talks with psychology friends saying you should throw out all your personality tests. Just figure out if someone is a value or a momentum investor. It'll tell you everything. Value investors are cynical. They're curmudgeonly. They act older than they are. They believe nothing you say. Momentum investors, you're much happier people. Doesn't necessarily work better. But I go, yeah, it's up. That's great. Let's have more of it. Turns out both work, and they work better in combination. But it's pretty hard to find a person who can hold both these ideas in their heads. Models help. Risk managed. I think that word is the single most important part of being a quantitative manager. An individual stock can have every good characteristic. I told you it's a lot of ways to measure value and momentum. There's a lot more to what we do than value and momentum. Imagine you have 20 things that you love in a stock. That's your model. You can find a stock that's great on all 20, and it can go down 100% tomorrow because it turned out to be a fraud. Right? You would not use the worst thing on, I was going to say the worst thing on earth. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration. One of the stupider things you could do in investing would be to use a quantitative model to bet the ranch on one stock. What a quantitative model does is want to go long 400 stocks that in aggregate have the characteristics it likes, and underweight or short 400 stocks that are the opposite. You're not betting on an individual company. You don't know much about an individual company. On that side, and here's where I said I'd be honest with you, the team visiting the company, the team who's only going to own 11 stocks, knows a ton more about those 11 stocks. That's their advantage. Their disadvantage is if they're horribly wrong about any one of them, they're kind of doomed. We are playing more of a statistical game. We are about these 400 companies of a similar type with similar characteristics on average beating the opposite. I make an analogy, and this is a dangerous one. This is a pure mathematical analogy, This is not meant to be a moral or ethical analogy. But being a quant manager is a lot more like running a casino than anything else. When you run a casino, you don't want one blackjack table with someone showing up, a billionaire showing up, and saying, I want to play $10 million a hand. Because yes, you have an edge, but if he plays right, you have a 51% edge, and you can go bankrupt pretty easily. You don't want that. And again, please stick with me. This is not a moral or ethical analogy. But what you want is 14 greyhounds full of grandmas with laundry sacks of quarters. Because any individual grandma might win, but as a group, the grandmas don't win. You have a 55% chance of taking any one of their money and approximately 100% chance of taking the group's money. Again, not an ethical or moral analogy, but quants are more like that. We want a portfolio of stocks with characteristics that on average we think lead to better returns, but we do not want to bet too much on any one thing, because statistics can always lie. They can desperately lie about small isolated bets. Finally, quants can do a few things that are much harder to do with visit the company, concentrated type managers. We make explicit trade-offs with trading costs. It's very hard to know for visit the company type people. We trade electronically. That's been a revolution. I mentioned before, we're not high frequency traders, but we are quants. We're also electronic traders. That stands in the middle. That's a much longer talk, but we're two of the three. We're quant and electronic, but not high frequency. A lot of things. I'm talking mostly about quantitative stock picking, using quantitative models to choose individual stocks. You can use this to beat a benchmark like a traditional manager. If someone tells you to beat the S&P 500, you own 200 stocks that are the 200 best on your model instead of all 500. You're fully invested, you're doing nothing odd or scary. Or you can use this as a quantitative hedge fund manager to go long your 200 favorite stocks and short your 200 favorite stocks, maybe all over the world, make it 1,000 long and short. The hedge fund manager has to use what I call the dirty words of finance: leverage, derivatives, and shorting. To produce a return long and short, the goal is to produce a return that's unrelated to the direction of the market. But there are different ways you can use a model, but they all fall under quant equity. You might hear a lot of this. High frequency trading, which I am walking the line of both, again, vigorously denying I'm a high frequency trader while telling you I think they're still nice people doing a good thing. Something called statistical arbitrage. Quant macro, there are people who trade. There are George Soroses who use models. I don't know if he would like that characterization, actually.
Systematic trading in particular?
Yeah, I'm going to distinguish that. Managed futures are systematic traders who almost invariably are trend followers. Their main way, and it's a great question, the main way they trade is buying what's been going up in the last year and selling what's been going down. Turns out, if you are a fan of efficient markets, and I've strayed, 20 some odd years ago, I was more in that camp, and I think living through the tech bubble and the real estate credit bubble, among other things, have probably certainly weakened me on that and made me more of what's called a behavioralist, an idea that markets can be very good long term but aren't perfect and make some errors. Managed futures traders largely buy what's going up in the last 1 to 12 months and sell what's going down. They don't even do the value part usually. It's been an annoyingly good strategy for 100 years. We wrote a paper recently on this called "A Century Plus Evidence on Managed Futures." There aren't many things you can test that long, but because they only trade indices, they don't trade individual stocks, our data goes way further back.
Now, his presentation goes on longer, but he goes into areas that, frankly, I'm not that interested in. The cross-sectional momentum of individual equities, not my thing, not my expertise. I can't help you there, but I did want to end his presentation, Cliff Asness's presentation, Cliff Asness of AQR. I wanted to end his presentation with him talking about managed futures. Now, I feel like an apologist. I have to constantly explain this damn term, managed futures. It's an industry jargon firm because trend following essentially developed in Chicago. Futures exchanges That's what Chicago is known for. But managed futures doesn't tell you a damn thing. This governmental term, this industry jargon, it doesn't mean anything. Managed futures, all that's doing is telling you about the instrument. It's not telling you about the strategy. The vast majority of the successful managed futures participants use the strategy of trend following. So when you hear managed futures and you see a long track record, assume it's trend following, unless somebody has got something really different that you really need to wrap your arms around, something really new. But look, the vast majority of managed futures equals trend following. And I love that Cliff goes ahead and says it's a strategy that just works. I mean, there's a guy who's managing a massive fund, and he has no problem walking out into the public sphere on a college campus in front of bright people that could go ahead and try and rip him a new one. And this is also a guy from the University of Chicago, a place where if you don't exactly toe the line, that might not necessarily be good for the career. And here is Cliff coming out and saying this strategy has worked for at least 100 years. It's hard to kill this damn trend following, but the big but, you want to have it. You want to have it for many reasons. Not only performance, but performance that comes at a different time than traditional investments. Because when that black swan comes in, that crisis alpha, that's going to be needed. Now you might say to yourself, Mike, who cares? Go away. It's a Trump rally. S&P is going to the moon. It can't possibly go down. Nothing can go wrong. Just sit back and relax and enjoy it. Stop losses? Who the hell needs a stop loss? Come on. That is indeed how many people think. And all we can do is play it forward because none of us know how it's going to shake out. No one's got a crystal ball. No one can predict a damn thing. But if you allow for the possibility that stocks, buy and hold stocks, long only stocks, basically no strategy, if you allow for the possibility that that can't go on forever, it's probably time to add a little more to your toolbox than what you currently got. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.